Picture this. It is June 3, 2026. You wake up, grab your coffee, and you check the news. But the headlines, well, they really don't feel like they belong to the world you were born into.
No, they definitely don't.
Right, because we are living in a moment where the technological singularity, that hypothetical point where artificial intelligence surpasses human comprehension and control, it just isn't something governments are frantically trying to stop anymore.
Yeah, the panic phase is sort of over.
Exactly. They aren't trying to pull the plug. They are just trying to measure it as it flies by. I mean, frame the stakes in your mind right now. Artificial intelligence is currently solving 80-year-old, seemingly impossible math problems.
Designing quantum chips.
Yes, it is actively designing next-generation quantum computer chips. It's acquiring both titanium physical bodies and incredibly orbital streak capabilities. And it is doing all of this while we, are just trying to figure out how to write a decent email.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is the absolute vertigo of the future arriving all at once, just crashing over the shoreline of our daily lives. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted, as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
So, to set the stage for you, our mission today is to unpack a truly fascinating dispatch. We are looking at a newsletter from Dr. Alex Wissner-Gross called The Innermost Loop, dated exactly June 3, 2026.
It's a really incredible piece of writing.
It really is. And the objective of this deep dive is to synthesize how AI is simultaneously breaking barriers across major domains. We're talking government regulation, higher mathematics, daily knowledge work, global high-stakes finance, and finally, the physical, biological world.
Basically everything.
Basically everything, yeah. We want to figure out what it all means for you, the person trying to actually navigate this rapidly shifting landscape without, losing your footing.
Well, the dispatch provides a remarkable systemic snapshot. I mean, Dr. Wissner-Gross is capturing a civilization in mid-leap.
Mid-leap. I like that.
Yeah, because we are witnessing the precise moment when AI transitions from a discrete tool like something operating on your local machine to the underlying administrative infrastructure of reality itself.
Wow. Okay, so how do we even start to understand that velocity?
To understand the velocity of this transition, you really have to look at the geopolitical framework enabling it. And that starts with how the U.S. government has chosen to handle the regulatory environment.
Right, because the White House recently issued an executive order. It's titled, Promoting Advanced Artificial Intelligence, Innovation, and Security. And usually when a disruptive technology emerges, the instinct is to build a massive regulatory fence around it.
Oh, absolutely, like aviation or pharmaceuticals.
Exactly, telecommunications too. But the mandate here takes a surprisingly hands-off approach. I mean, they are directing agencies to build classified tests of AI cyber capabilities, sure. And they're inviting developers to voluntarily share covered frontier models for 30 days before release.
The key word there being voluntarily.
Yeah, voluntarily. Crucially, the executive order strictly forbids any mandatory licensing regime.
And that prohibition of a mandatory licensing regime is, honestly, the defining policy choice of this decade.
You think it's that big of a deal?
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
Because a licensing regime would have required developers to submit their model architectures, their training data provenance, their alignment protocols, all of it, to a federal oversight board before public deployment.
So it would just grind everything to a halt.
Exactly. It would have introduced a pre-clearance bottleneck, effectively halting the iterative development cycle. By expressly forbidding that, the administration has basically signaled that maintaining a sovereign lead in artificial intelligence capabilities supersedes the desire for absolute domestic control.
They chose velocity over friction.
Right. They have chosen velocity over bureaucratic friction.
It's kind of like, well, it's like the government saw how fast these vehicles were traveling, and instead of building speed bumps or establishing a new class of commercial driver's licenses, they just handed out radar guns to benchmark the speed.
That is a great analogy, actually.
Thanks. They are acknowledging the momentum and simply asking to measure the telemetry as the models go by. But okay, if the government removes itself as the primary bottleneck, what takes its place?
Well, the constraint immediately shifts from regulatory clearance to raw resource acquisition. Specifically, The bottleneck becomes the training data itself.
Because they've run out of internet to read, basically?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The industry has effectively exhausted the high-quality, publicly available text on the internet. I mean, we have scraped the entirety of Wikipedia, Reddit, public GitHub repositories, and digitized books.
Right.
To continue scaling these models, companies need proprietary, highly structured data that hasn't been exposed to the public web. This is why the dispatch highlights Google's recent pivot. They're no longer just scraping.
Oh, right, they're buying it directly.
Yeah, they're actively purchasing source code directly from independent Play Store developers to train their internal coding tools.
See, that raises a critical point about the economics of data for me. Why buy code from random mobile app developers when Google already possesses some of the most sophisticated proprietary code bases in the world?
It seems counterintuitive, I know.
It really does. Like, is the code in a standard, everyday Play Store app really that valuable for training a frontier model?
It is incredibly valuable precisely because it represents the messy, real-world edge cases of software engineering.
Oh, because Google's own code is too clean.
Exactly. Google's internal code is highly optimized, standardized, and written by top-tier engineers operating within a very specific corporate framework. But a robust AI coding assistant needs to understand how average developers stitch together disparate APIs,
Right, how they handle legacy Android stuff.
Yeah, legacy lifecycle
Yeah.
events or how they write quick and dirty workarounds. By purchasing this code, Google is basically buying the human context of problem solving.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, relying purely on synthetic data like where an AI generates code to train another AI that can lead to model collapse over successive generations, you need fresh, human-generated entropy to keep the models mathematically grounded.
Entropy. So they are mining the long tail of human ingenuity to prevent their models from degrading into nonsense.
It's a good way to put it.
Meanwhile, Microsoft is attacking the market from a totally different architectural angle. They just dropped their MAI family, which is this suite of 7 different models.
Right, moving away from the giant monoliths.
Yeah. The specifications reveal a deliberate shift away from the one-size-fits-all approach. They have a reasoning model that purportedly beats Sonnet 4.6, a 5 billion parameter coder that operates cheaper than Haiku, an image model surpassing Nano Banana Pro, and a real-time transcription engine covering like 43 languages.
The MAI release really demonstrates the maturity of model distillation and quantization techniques. I mean, a few years ago, the prevailing theory was that intelligence scaled linearly with parameter count.
Right. Bigger is always better.
Exactly. We thought you needed a trillion-parameter behemoth to perform even basic logical tasks. But running a trillion parameters requires massive GPU VRAM and incurs just exorbitant inference costs.
Which nobody wants to pay.
Right. So Microsoft's 5 billion parameter coder is a highly specialized small language model, or SLM. By training a massive model first, and then having that teacher model generate highly curated specific data to train the smaller student model,
You get the same performance.
you achieve frontier-level coding capabilities on a footprint small enough to run locally on a standard laptop.
Which is insane. But if these hyper-efficient models can run locally and are trained on premium-purchased human logic, they aren't just going to be used to build simple web apps.
Definitely not.
According to Dr. Wissner-Gross's dispatch, these models are currently laying siege to the domains we previously considered the absolute pinnacle of human intellectual exclusivity.
Yeah, the high-level intellectual domains.
Let's look at the situation in higher mathematics. There is something called the Leiden Declaration on AI and Mathematics. It was spearheaded by 16 prominent mathematicians and backed by the International Mathematical Union.
It's a pretty aggressive pushback.
Very. They are demanding mandatory disclosure when AI is used in mathematical proofs and insisting that humans remain fully accountable for the correctness of the math.
And you have to look at the catalyst for this declaration. It was an AI model successfully disproving an 80-year-old Erdős conjecture.
Okay, stop right there. An 80-year-old conjecture.
Yes. And to appreciate the magnitude of this, you really have to understand the nature of combinatorial mathematics.
Break that down for me.
Sure. Paul Erdős dealt with discrete structures, graph theory, number theory. His conjectures often proposed that within seemingly chaotic, infinite sets of numbers, highly organized patterns must inevitably emerge.
Okay.
Proving or disproving these conjectures isn't just a matter of brute force calculation. It requires traversing an infinite state space where traditional deterministic algorithms just completely fail.
Right, because a computer can't just count to infinity.
Exactly. Historically, humans relied on profound intuitive leaps to find the right logical path through that massive space.
See, I think the general public assumes computers have always been better at math.
Yeah, they do.
But a calculator doing arithmetic is entirely different from an intelligence generating a novel topological proof. If the AI is disproving an 80-year-old conjecture, it implies the machine is exhibiting something akin to intuition.
Yes, mechanical intuition.
But why the defensive posture from the mathematical community? I mean, if a tool helps you uncover a fundamental truth about the universe, shouldn't you embrace it? Why put out a declaration?
Well, the defensive posture stems from a severe epistemic crisis. Mathematics is really the only discipline built on absolute verifiable truth.
Right. A proof is a proof.
Exactly. A proof is a logical chain that any competent human can follow from the axioms straight to the conclusion. But advanced AI operates in high-dimensional latent spaces that do not map neatly onto human cognition.
So we can't follow the steps.
Right. If a neural network outputs a combinatorial proof that relies on analyzing patterns across 400 dimensions, and the resulting mathematical argument is millions of pages long, no human can verify it.
Oh, wow.
The Leiden Declaration is a desperate attempt to retain human agency. They are asking a profound philosophical question. If the machine provides the correct answer, but the logic is fundamentally inaccessible to the human mind, can we still call it mathematics?
That is heavy. You're touching on the black box problem, where we basically outsource the definition of truth to a system we can't internally audit. And this crisis of verifiability isn't confined to theoretical mathematics. It is aggressively pushing into the applied logic of the legal system.
Yeah, the Stanford study.
Right. The Dispatch cites a recent blind study out of Stanford involving 3,000 comparisons between AI-generated legal answers and those produced by human law students. And the law professors preferred the AI's answers 75% of the time.
The 75% preference rate is notable, sure, but the truly disruptive data point from that Stanford study is the error analysis.
What did they find there?
The study found that the AI answers were flagged as actively harmful or legally perilous only 1/3 as often as the human student's answers.
Okay, wait. That flips the conventional wisdom completely upside down.
It really does.
Because the prevailing narrative has always been that LLMs hallucinate case law, they invent fake precedents, and they require constant human supervision to remain safe. But this study suggests the human under pressure is actually the greater liability.
Yeah, consider the cognitive mechanics of legal analysis. A human law student under time constraints relies on memory recall, which is notoriously fallible.
Oh, for sure.
And then they attempt to synthesize analogical reasoning. When a human blanks on a specific precedent, they often attempt to construct a plausible-sounding legal argument to bridge the gap.
Basically faking it till they make it.
Exactly, and that leads to harmful errors. An AI system, particularly one utilizing retrieval augmented generation, or RCAD, operates entirely differently.
How so?
It cross-references the user's prompt against a vectorized database of all existing case law in milliseconds, retrieves the exact relevant statutes, and synthesizes the answer with perfect recall. The hallucination problem has largely been mitigated by grounding the model in closed-domain databases.
Wow, so if the model is demonstrably 3 times safer than a top-tier human student, the implications for malpractice insurance and big law billing models are just staggering.
They're existential.
Yeah. How does a partner justify billing a client $1,000 an hour for a junior associate's time when the associate is statistically more likely to introduce a fatal legal error than the software? It effectively hollows out the entire apprenticeship model of knowledge work.
It does. And the compounding effect of this capability is terrifying when you scale it globally. The Dispatch notes that ChatGPT reached 1 billion monthly users faster than any application in human history.
That's a wild metric.
And Claude's user base is compounding at 640% annually. OpenAI Codex has surpassed 5 million weekly active users. We are taking the analytical superiority demonstrated in the Stanford study and deploying it at planetary scale.
And it's not just a matter of people chatting with an interface anymore, right? The deployment mechanisms are becoming fully autonomous.
Yes, moving beyond the chat box.
OpenAI recently shipped a feature for Codex called Sites, which operates as a direct competitor to platforms like Lovable. It allows a user to write a natural language prompt, and the AI doesn't just generate the code.
Right, it does the whole thing.
Yeah, it acts as the entire deployment pipeline, spinning up the application at a live URL instantly.
The introduction of Sites basically abstracts away the entire discipline of DevOps. Historically, writing the code was only half the battle.
Oh yeah, getting it online is a nightmare.
You had to configure the server environment, manage Kubernetes clusters, set up DNS routing, and maintain continuous integration pipelines. Sites collapses that entire supply chain into a single inference step.
That's incredible.
The model translates your intent directly into a deployed digital asset. It effectively lowers the barrier to entry for software creation to zero. It turns natural language into the only programming language that matters.
OpenAI also bolted on 6 role-specific plugins tailored for analysts, marketers, salespeople, and bankers. They are pre-configuring the context windows so these models act as bespoke, specialized employees for every major corporate department.
In executing complex workflows without the user ever seeing a line of code.
Exactly. But Microsoft is pushing this abstraction even deeper, moving the AI out of the browser entirely and embedding it directly into the operating system architecture.
Yeah, the integration at the OS level fundamentally alters the human-computer interaction paradigm.
Tell me about Scout.
Well, the dispatch mentions Microsoft's Scout, which is an always-on assistant that monitors context across Outlook, Teams, and local files simultaneously. But the more critical development is execution containers.
Execution containers.
Yes. This is a Windows-level sandbox environment currently being utilized by OpenAI, NVIDIA, Manus, and Knox Research.
Okay, hold on. If you give an autonomous agent read and write access to the local file system through an execution container, aren't you just opening the door to catastrophic zero-day vulnerabilities?
It sounds risky, yes.
Right, like how do you prevent an AI agent from accidentally wiping a hard drive or exfiltrating secure corporate data while it tries to optimize a spreadsheet?
That is precisely why the sandbox is required. Execution containers operate by utilizing virtualization tech, somewhat similar to Docker, but deeply integrated into the Windows kernel.
Oh, so it's isolated.
Exactly. It allows the AI agent to execute arbitrary code, manipulate files, and run terminal commands within a strictly isolated environment. If the agent writes a malicious script or makes a catastrophic error, it only destroys the temporary virtual container.
Not the host machine.
Right, not the host machine. This architecture allows companies to safely deploy autonomous agents. They don't just suggest actions, but actively perform them on the user's local hardware. You transition from using AI as an external oracle to living inside an AI-managed administrative ecosystem.
And that ecosystem is extending far beyond corporate desktops, which is kind of scary. Anthropic is expanding Project Glasswing, opening their Claude Mythos preview to approximately 150 organizations across critical infrastructure sectors.
Power grids, water systems, healthcare networks.
Yeah, we are talking about handing over the load balancing of municipal power grids to predictive transformers.
The shift from traditional algorithmic controllers, like PID controllers, to AI in SCADA systems is pretty much inevitable due to the sheer complexity of modern infrastructure.
Why is that? Are the old systems just too slow?
Well, traditional systems operate on rigid, pre-programmed logic. If the voltage drops below X, open valve Y. But a modern power grid, especially dealing with intermittent renewable energy sources like wind and solar, extreme weather events, and fluctuating dynamic demand.
It's just too chaotic.
Exactly. It operates in a highly nonlinear, chaotic environment. A predictive transformer model can analyze millions of sensor inputs in real time. It anticipates demand spikes hours before they happen based on weather patterns and historical data, and dynamically routes power with an efficiency that static algorithms just cannot match.
So it effectively becomes the autonomic nervous system of the city.
That's a perfect analogy.
Just as the human brain regulates heart rate and blood pressure without conscious thought, society is delegating the metabolic processes of civilization to the machine. But, and this is a huge face, but running this autonomic nervous system requires an immense, almost unfathomable amount of physical compute.
Oh, absolutely.
The AI may be invisible, but the thermodynamics of training it are violently physical. Which brings us to the financial reality detailed in the dispatch, the compute arms race, and the token crisis.
The abstract magic of generative AI is entirely tethered to the gritty reality of silicon fabrication, copper wiring, data center cooling systems, and high-yield corporate debt.
High-yield debt, yeah.
Dr. Wissner-Gross accurately notes that this entire autonomous future runs on borrowed silicon and borrowed money.
Let's examine the Broadcom private credit deal, because the scale of this is staggering. Broadcom secured a $36 billion private credit facility specifically to purchase Google Tensor Processing Units, or TPUs, which they are then leasing back to Anthropic.
Right.
The debt structure is really complex. The senior tranche is yielding around 5.75%, while the riskier unbacked slice is paying out 8 to 9%.
The reliance on private credit here reveals the systemic macroeconomic risk embedded in the AI boom.
Why private credit instead of normal banks?
Because traditional, highly regulated commercial banks are fundamentally conservative. They look at the depreciation schedule of AI hardware, where a state-of-the-art TPU might become computationally obsolete in 18 to 24 months.
Oh, wow. 2 years and it's junk.
Exactly. And they refuse to underwrite a $36 billion loan against assets that degrade in value that quickly. Consequently, the industry is forced into the shadow banking sector.
So they are raising capital from massive private equity pools and sovereign wealth funds that are willing to stomach the volatility. But if the underlying asset becomes obsolete in 2 years, the economic value generated by Anthropic using those chips has to be astronomical just to service the interest on the debt, let alone the principal.
Exactly. The 8 to 9% yield on the unbacked slice of that debt reflects the very real possibility of default. It is basically an uncollateralized bet on the timeline of artificial general intelligence.
That is wild.
And it isn't just the chips. It's the physical infrastructure required to house them. The dispatch highlights a data center linked to CoreWeave that recently raised $900 million in junk notes at a 7.5% interest rate.
Just for one data center.
Well, this is part of a broader $27 billion borrowing spree this year alone, intended purely to pour concrete and secure grid connections for GPUs.
We are essentially financing the most advanced technology in human history using high-yield junk bonds.
That's house of cards in some ways.
Right. And the pressure to drive down compute costs is existential for these companies, which is why Microsoft is aggressively pushing innovation at the fundamental physics layer. They recently unveiled the Majorana 2, a topological quantum computing chip.
And this is where it gets really sci-fi.
Yes, because the truly wild part is that the physical layout of this quantum chip was designed by Microsoft's own agentic AI.
The Majorana 2 represents a critical inflection point. Classical computing, which relies on binary transistors, is hitting the physical limits of Moore's law.
Because things are getting too small. Right.
Exactly. You can only shrink a transistor so much before quantum tunneling causes the electrons to jump the gates, rendering the chip useless. The solution is to harness quantum mechanics directly using qubits.
Okay, but qubits are famously unstable.
Very. Standard qubits are incredibly fragile. The slightest change in temperature or electromagnetic radiation causes decoherence, destroying the calculation.
So how does a topological quantum chip solve the decoherence problem?
Well, topological quantum computing relies on theoretical quasi-particles called non-abelian anyons.
Non-abelian anyons, got it.
Yeah. Instead of storing information in the physical state of a single particle, the information is stored in the braided paths these anyons take around each other over time.
Braided paths, like weaving.
Basically. Because the information is encoded globally in the topology of the braid, rather than locally in a single particle, it is mathematically immune to local environmental noise. It's like a knot in a shoelace. Jiggling the shoelace doesn't untie the knot.
That is a brilliant way to explain it. And Microsoft used an AI agent to design this architecture.
Yes, the AI optimized the complex spatial layout of these topological structures, achieving a 1,000-fold improvement in qubit reliability.
1,000-fold?
Right. This breakthrough effectively pulls Microsoft's target for scalable, fault-tolerant quantum computing forward to 2029. If they succeed, the current compute constraints bottlenecking the AI industry could just evaporate, as quantum systems can perform specific optimizations exponentially faster than classical supercomputers.
But until we reach that quantum horizon in 2029, we are trapped in the current reality of severe classical compute scarcity.
Very true.
And that scarcity is causing absolute chaos within corporate IT budgets, largely because humans are incredibly inefficient at operating these models. The dispatch points to a situation at Uber where they had to cap engineers at $1,500 a month for coding tools like Claude Code.
Yeah, that was a wild story.
Because the staff burned through an entire year's AI budget in just 4 months.
The friction here lies in the interface between human psychology and machine logic. The dispatch highlights a theory from a subscriber named KPK18 who diagnosed the root cause of Uber's budget implosion. They termed it vibe coding run amok.
Vibe coding perfectly captures the modern engineering ethos, honestly. But what is mechanically happening under the hood to cause such a massive financial drain?
It comes down to how context windows operate and how humans utilize API calls. When a developer interacts with an AI coding assistant, they rarely provide a strict, mathematically precise prompt.
They're lazy, basically.
They offer a vague directive: build me a login module. The AI attempts to infer the architecture, writes the code, and inevitably gets it slightly wrong because the human intent was underspecified.
Right.
The developer then replies, "No, fix the CSS and make it connect to the legacy database."
And every time they replied, the entire conversational history is sent back to the model?
Precisely. The context window inflates. By the 10th iteration, the developer is sending hundreds of thousands of tokens of historical context just to ask the AI to change the color of a button.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the compounding cost of that.
Yes, since API costs are calculated per token processed, this recursive, unstructured chatting burns compute cycles exponentially. KPK 18 notes that users lack clear development plans, they use the most expensive models for trivial tasks, and they essentially treat the AI like a highly paid, infinitely patient intern.
That makes total sense.
They chat with the model to figure out what they want, rather than knowing what they want before executing the prompt.
It's as if we handed every employee a corporate credit card tied to a supercomputer, and they are using it to brainstorm out loud. We have built a Ferrari, but we are just revving the engine in the driveway because we don't know how to drive a manual transmission.
Exactly.
And this friction between human sloppiness and machine precision isn't just destroying API budgets. It is actively restructuring the labor market and changing who corporations actually decide to hire.
The sociological impacts detailed in the dispatch are highly counterintuitive, particularly regarding employment trends.
Right, because everyone assumes the immediate threat to the labor market is direct automation. You know, the idea that the AI is going to immediately replace the junior analyst.
A Terminator coming for your job.
Yeah, exactly. But the dispatch references a New York Fed study that reveals a much more nuanced dynamic. The study found that remote work, not artificial intelligence, explains nearly 2/3 of the rising unemployment rate among young college graduates.
Wait, really? Remote work?
Yeah. Employers have simply stopped hiring junior staff that they cannot mentor in person.
We've spent years agonizing over the algorithm displacing the entry-level worker, assuming the machine was actively taking the jobs. However, the New York Fed data indicates a breakdown in the human infrastructure of corporate knowledge transfer.
Knowledge transfer.
Right. The traditional firm relies heavily on tacit knowledge. That's the unspoken, uncodified rules of a profession that are transferred through proximity. A senior employee observes a junior struggling, casually corrects a minor error over the cubicle wall, and gradually shapes them through unstructured osmosis.
But if you transition a company to a fully asynchronous remote environment, that tacit knowledge transfer just dies.
It vanishes entirely.
You cannot serendipitously mentor a 22-year-old over a scheduled 30-minute Zoom call. It requires immense intentional effort from the senior staff to document every process.
Exactly. The friction of remote onboarding became too high. Companies looked at the return on investment of training remote juniors, realized the knowledge wasn't transferring, and simply ceased hiring them. The breakdown of human proximity did more immediate damage to the youth labor market than the deployment of LLMs.
But I have to challenge the long-term viability of that strategy. I mean, if corporations simply start hiring junior employees because remote work makes mentorship too difficult, they are cannibalizing their own future.
They are.
In 10 years, when the current senior staff retires, the talent pipeline will be completely empty. How does the industry sustain itself?
Well, that is where the direct automation threat actually materializes. Companies like Thrive Holdings, run by Joshua Kushner, are explicitly betting that the human pipeline is no longer necessary.
They don't care about the pipeline.
Not at all. They're deploying a $1 billion fund to acquire accounting firms. But this isn't a traditional private equity roll-up. They are buying these firms specifically to execute leveraged buyouts predicated on massive AI margin expansion.
Wow.
They don't care about the 10-year human talent pipeline because they intend to gut the white-collar labor cost entirely, replacing the junior accountants with specialized models trained on the firm's historical data.
So the remote work phenomenon hollows out the junior ranks, and then private equity steps in to automate whatever is left.
Basically, yes.
But extracting the precise data required to train those bespoke models is proving to be a highly contentious battleground. The dispatch notes that Meta was forced to roll back a surveillance tool that actively logged employees' keystrokes and recorded their screens.
Yeah, that caused a huge uproar.
They were attempting to harvest the behavioral data of their own workforce to train AI agents, but the internal resistance was so severe they had to abandon the program.
The Meta situation really exposes the fundamental data gap in human-computer interaction. We discussed earlier how Google is buying source code to understand how humans build software.
Right.
But to train an AI agent to actually navigate an operating system, execute complex software workflows, and replicate a human's daily job, the model requires imitation learning.
Imitation learning. So it has to watch you.
Exactly. Imitation learning demands massive, high-fidelity datasets of state-action pairs. The model needs to see the exact state of the screen and the corresponding physical action the human took, the mouse movement, the click, the hesitation, the keystroke.
To build an AI that perfectly mimics the worker, you must subject the worker to absolute granular surveillance. Every microinteraction becomes training data for their own replacement.
The fact that Meta's employees successfully rebelled against this panopticon demonstrates a critical boundary in the modern workplace. Humans are highly receptive to using AI as an external tool, but they draw a hard, ethical, and psychological line at being instrumented as the biological training data for an autonomous agent.
We are willing to let the machine help us swing the hammer, but we refuse to let it record our muscle movements so it can swing the hammer itself.
Well said.
This tension around the physical reality of work transitions us perfectly into the final section of the dispatch. The Singularity is no longer confined to data centers, API calls, and software abstraction layers. It is violently breaking out into the physical world, manifesting in robotics, orbital logistics, and even human biology.
The physical manifestation of superintelligence is perhaps the most visceral indicator of the transition Dr. Wissner-Gross is documenting.
It's the stuff we can actually see.
Right. The dispatch highlights a projection from Barclays Bank estimating that humanoid robots will become a $200 billion market within the next decade.
A $200 billion projection implies a massive, heavily industrialized supply chain for bipedal robotics. We are moving from the era of specialized robotic arms welding car chassis on an assembly line to generalized humanoid frames capable of navigating unstructured human environments, hospitals, warehouses, and homes.
The breakthrough enabling this isn't necessarily mechanical. I mean, we have had the actuation technology for years.
The motors and joints?
Yeah, exactly. The barrier was always the software. Navigating the physical world requires immense spatial reasoning and the ability to adapt to novel physical disturbances.
Like someone bumping into it.
Right. The large multimodal models we discussed earlier, the ones parsing complex visual data and executing logical reasoning, are now being deployed as the brains of these physical units. Furthermore, the industry has solved the sim-to-real transfer problem.
Sim-to-real? What's that?
They train the robotic neural network in millions of simulated physics environments, running thousands of parallel iterations, and then transfer those learned physical intuitions directly into the titanium chassis.
So the AI learns to walk, balance, and manipulate objects in the cloud before it ever takes a physical step.
Exactly.
But the physical footprint of these technologies gets even more extreme when you look beyond the atmosphere. SpaceX just secured FAA approval to test their Starfall capsules. These are autonomous reentry vehicles designed to manufacture materials in orbit, in zero gravity, and then splash down with pinpoint accuracy in the Pacific Ocean.
The economics of orbital manufacturing are actually very compelling.
Why? What can you make up there that you can't make here?
Certain high-value materials, such as Z-band fiber optics, perfect silicon crystalline structures for semiconductors, and specific protein crystals for pharmaceuticals, they suffer from sedimentation and convection currents when manufactured under Earth's gravity.
Oh, because gravity pulls the molecules down.
Right. The microgravity environment of low Earth orbit allows for the creation of flawless molecular structures. SpaceX's Starfall program is basically building the autonomous logistics network to commercialize the vacuum of space.
But the commentators analyzing this development immediately noted the terrifying dual-use implications of the Starfall capsule.
Yeah, the military application.
If you engineer a vehicle with a heat shield robust enough to survive atmospheric reentry and navigational thrusters precise enough to drop a payload of delicate pharmaceuticals exactly on a recovery ship in the Pacific, you have inadvertently perfected a kinetic weapon delivery system. The dispatch refers to them as rods from God.
Rods from God refers to the concept of kinetic bombardment. It is a theoretical weapon system where you drop a dense cylinder of tungsten from orbit.
And there are no explosives involved.
None. The sheer kinetic energy generated by a dense object entering the atmosphere at Mach 10 and striking the Earth yields an impact equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon, but entirely devoid of radioactive fallout.
That is terrifying.
The dual-use dilemma is inherent to all advanced logistical technologies. The exact same AI-driven telemetry, atmospheric drag calculations, and thruster control required to return a commercial zero-G factory safely to Earth can be instantly repurposed to deliver an unstoppable, untrackable kinetic strike anywhere on the globe in minutes.
Ultimate logistical precision inherently equates to ultimate military power.
Unfortunately, yes.
We are witnessing the deployment of humanoid robotics driven by generalized AI and orbital logistics platforms capable of kinetic bombardment. It feels like we are updating the physical firmware of the planet, but the dispatch takes one final, incredibly fascinating turn by turning the lens inward, looking at human biology.
This is where it gets really profound.
It discusses GLP-1 drugs, the weight loss medications that have fundamentally altered public health over the last few years. The new data indicates that GLP-1 drugs reduce the need for knee replacements. And the astonishing part is that this reduction occurs seemingly independent of the actual weight the patients lose.
Dr. Wissner-Gross is drawing a profound philosophical and systemic parallel here. For the past decade, computer scientists have grappled with the black box nature of deep learning. We construct the neural network architecture, feed it data, and it achieves miraculous results. But we cannot trace the exact deterministic logic through the hidden layers.
The model possesses undocumented features.
Exactly. The GLP-1 data reveals that human biology operates on an identical premise. We are a legacy black box.
Because we originally assumed the mechanism was purely mechanical, we thought the drug suppressed appetite, the patient lost 50 pounds, and therefore there was less physical mechanical stress on the knee joint, preventing the need for a replacement.
That was the logical assumption, yes.
But if the knee health improves regardless of the weight loss, it means the GLP-1 receptors are triggering secondary and tertiary systemic effects we didn't engineer.
Precisely. GLP-1 receptors are present in the brainstem and the immune system, not just the gut. Activating them appears to modulate systemic immune responses, severely downregulating the inflammatory cytokines present in the synovial fluid of the knee joint.
Oh, wow. So it's fixing the inflammation directly.
It is a systemic anti-inflammatory effect that bypasses the mechanical weight loss mechanism entirely. Just as Microsoft's agentic AI discovered a topological quantum chip layout that human physicists couldn't conceptualize, our pharmacological interventions are accidentally triggering complex, deeply interconnected biological pathways that we do not fully understand.
We are hacking the biological wetware without possessing the complete source code.
Exactly.
It is a humbling realization. We are reverse engineering both the silicon minds we are building and the biological bodies we inhabit simultaneously. Which brings us to the conclusion of this dispatch and a stark assessment of our place in history. The newsletter references a recent New York Times audit of Elon Musk.
Ah, yes.
They analyzed over 600 claims he made back in 2015 regarding what the future would look like. Despite his reputation for missed deadlines and chaotic management, the audit found he actually achieved 75% of his most audacious goals exactly on time.
The human mind struggles to contextualize exponential change. When Musk discussed reusable orbital rockets, mass-market autonomous electric vehicles, and brain-computer interfaces in 2015, the consensus was that these concepts were decades, if not centuries, away.
Everyone thought he was crazy.
Right. The 75% success rate validates the core thesis of the newsletter. The impossible is rapidly becoming routine. It perfectly encapsulates the William Gibson quote that Dr. Wissner-Gross uses to close the dispatch. The future is already here. The last 25% just isn't evenly distributed yet.
We've covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started with the U.S. government intentionally abandoning the licensing bottleneck to prioritize velocity. We explored how AI is synthesizing high-dimensional logic to disprove 80-year-old mathematical conjectures and outperforming top-tier law students without hallucinating.
It's been a journey.
Yeah, and we examined the OS-level integration of execution containers, the macroeconomics of $36 billion private credit facilities funding data centers, and the chaotic token burn of vibe coding. We discussed the irony of remote work dismantling the human mentorship pipeline, the pushback against workplace surveillance, and finally, the physical realities of orbital manufacturing and biological black boxes.
It is a comprehensive portrait of an infrastructure transition, but it leaves us grappling with profound, unresolved systemic tensions.
What kind of tensions?
Well, a subscriber to the newsletter named You Steve poses two vital questions at the end of the text that demand consideration. First, will humans willingly cede their self-sovereignty to AI political agents and the emergent societal protocols they design?
That's a scary thought.
And second, if that handover occurs, how will humans remain in the innermost loop?
The innermost loop. The central command node where the actual decisions governing reality are made.
The trajectory we map today suggests a continuous, voluntary retreat from that loop. We retreat from mathematical proofs because the latent space logic is faster and more comprehensive.
Right.
We retreat from legal analysis because the RA databases are demonstrably safer. We retreat from software engineering because codex sites can translate intent to deployment instantly. We even retreat from the arduous task of mentoring our own youth because asynchronous digital work is more convenient.
It's just easier to let the machine do it.
With every optimization, we delegate a fraction of our cognitive sovereignty to the machine architecture. You guys ask me the terminal question. If we relentlessly outsource the friction of thinking and managing civilization to autonomous agents, do we inevitably architect our own eviction from the control room?
It's an unsettling conclusion. We are actively financing systems that out-reason our finest mathematical minds using high-yield shadow credit. These systems are writing their own software updates, designing their own quantum hardware to accelerate their own compute efficiency, and acquiring titanium bodies and orbital logistics capabilities.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to consider as we conclude this deep dive. If we accept this reality, if the machine intelligence is currently building itself, funding itself, and manifesting itself across the physical and biological world, are we still the operators of the innermost loop?
Right.
Or have we, through our pursuit of ultimate efficiency, unwittingly become the biological bootloader for a new kind of planetary intelligence? Are we merely the organic scaffolding required to launch the silicon mind?
The biological bootloader, that is a concept that is going to linger long after the audio stops. The singularity isn't a distant horizon line we are driving toward. As the events of June 3, 2026 clearly demonstrate, the singularity is already here, and we are just trying to navigate the turbulence inside the event horizon.
Yeah.
The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6 android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Klissa Wavelength. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
Cause I hang out, 내 다음 탑